The official envelope with the logo of the Homeowners Association was on my desk. My heart raced when I read the first line. Property reclassification notice. An acre of land that my grandfather bought in 1952 had been reclassified as community common property. 70 years of family history wiped out with a single signature. I immediately called the HOA office. The secretary told me that the president, Samantha Palmer, could see me that afternoon. When I got there, Samantha was already with her lawyer, Patrick. Mr. Hayes, I understand your frustration, but the recent survey clearly showed that this area has always been part of the common areas, Samantha said with a rehearsed smile. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. Patrick pushed a folder toward me. The documents show that the boundaries have been wrong for decades. We're just fixing that. And coincidentally, Samantha continued, this fix allows us to build our new sports center right there. We'll have indoor tennis courts, a top-notch gym, a heated pool. It's going to boost property values all around the neighborhood. Even mine, which would lose an entire acre, I asked. You don't even use that part. It's basically overgrown, she replied dismissively. When I got home, I noticed that the Reynolds, my neighbors to the west, had installed a tennis court that seemed to encroach on my property. Isabella Reynolds waved at me while her husband Richard hit balls against the wall. The racket sounds and loud music continued until 11 p.m. I couldn't sleep that night. In the attic, I found the wooden box where my father kept the old property documents. The original 1952 map showed stone markers that defined the boundaries. The new survey presented by the HOA had subtle, but significant differences. I called my cousin James, who worked at the county records office. The original records are here, James confirmed after checking. And there's something odd. A cadastral update was made 3 months ago, requested by the HOA, but without formally notifying the affected owners. I hired Thomas Anderson, a retired surveyor my father knew. These stone markers are the most reliable legal starting point, Thomas explained as we walked the property. We're going to find them and remeasure everything. After 2 days of work, Thomas made a surprising discovery. Alexander, your actual boundaries go beyond what you thought. That old oak tree is on your property, and that means at least a third of the Reynolds court is also on yours. The next day, I knocked on the door of Eleanor Wilson, a 78-year-old lady who had lived in the community since its beginning. Of course I remember your grandfather, Eleanor said while serving tea. He was a man obsessed with history. He found Native American artifacts in that area that they now want to take. He even donated some to the local museum where I used to teach history. Eleanor showed me old photos of the property and a local newspaper from 1954 that mentioned the archaeological finds. We need Laura from the Historical Society, Eleanor suggested. She can help verify the historical value of that area. When Laura visited my property, she got excited upon finding ceramic fragments similar to the ones my grandfather had donated decades ago. This might be enough to request a historic area designation, Laura explained while photographing the finds. I remembered that my father used to play chess with Sheriff Davis. Maybe he could help with some legal guidance. The following week, I received an invitation to an informational meeting about the new sports center. Strangely, the meeting was scheduled with just 24 hours notice, at a time that clashed with my work commitment. When I asked the HOA secretary about the timing, she looked embarrassed. It was Samantha who insisted on that specific date. That evening, powerful security lights were installed on the Reynolds property, pointed directly at my house. The glare invaded my room and made it impossible to sleep without the blinds closed. The next morning, I discovered that the stakes Thomas had put in place to mark the correct boundaries had been removed overnight. I was having coffee when I heard the noise of heavy machinery. Looking out the window, I saw tractors and construction equipment lining up near my property line. Samantha was there with the Reynolds and some HOA board members. We're starting site preparation today, Samantha announced as I approached. All the documents have been approved by the board. Without my permission, you can't enter my property, I said firmly. This is no longer your property, Mr. Hayes, Samantha replied, holding the reclassification papers. And I suggest you don't interfere in community matters. The tractor operator started the engine, ready to take down the first tree, a century-old oak that my grandfather used to call the Guardian. I ran inside and called Sheriff Davis. Within 15 minutes, his patrol car was on my property. What do we have here, Alexander? He asked, surveying the scene filled with heavy equipment and agitated people. They're trying to cut down trees and start construction on my property without legal permission, I explained, handing him the original documents and Thomas's new measurements. The sheriff examined the papers and walked over to Samantha, who seemed irritated by his presence. "Ms. Palmer, we need to halt this operation until the legality is verified. These machines can't operate today." "We have full authority through the HOA," protested Samantha. "Everything has been approved by the board." "HOA documents don't replace the county's legal property boundaries," the sheriff replied. "And from what I see here, there's a legitimate dispute. Nothing will be done until we sort this out." Eleanor Wilson arrived at that moment, followed by other curious residents who had heard the commotion. She approached some of the HOA board members who were there. "Sophia, Daniel, did you really approve this? Cutting down the historic orchard without a proper hearing?" Sophia Chen, an architect who always advocated for green spaces, looked surprised. "We were told it was just an unused lot with no value, and that Alexander had been notified properly, and that construction wouldn't start until all legal procedures were followed," added Daniel Stewart, glancing uncomfortably at the equipment already positioned. The sheriff ordered the machines to be removed, and Samantha had no choice but to comply. As she left, she muttered, "This isn't over, Hayes." When everyone had left, Eleanor commented, "She mentioned outside investors at the last board meeting. I think there's something bigger going on here." Over the next few weeks, I dived into an exhaustive investigation. Laura from the Historical Society confirmed that the site held significant artifacts, and she organized a small team to catalog the finds. "This kind of untouched collection is rare," Laura explained, "especially with the original documentation made by your grandfather. This really strengthens our case for a historic designation." My cousin James brought me copies of all the cadastral documents related to the community over the past 5 years. I noticed a pattern. Several properties near mine were acquired by a company called Mountain View Properties, LLC. "I checked the records for that LLC," James said. "It was set up only 8 months ago, by Patrick Miller, the same lawyer representing the HOA. Thomas Anderson finished his official survey, confirming that the original stone markers clearly placed the disputed area within my property, and that the Reynolds Court encroached about 90 square meters of my land. And I found something interesting," Thomas added. "The survey that the HOA is using has the digital signature of a surveyor who retired last year. I called him, and he confirmed that he never did that particular work. Meanwhile, I activated a security camera that caught Richard Reynolds and another man removing the boundary stakes we had put back the night before. With that evidence, Sheriff Davis issued a formal warning to stop interfering." One afternoon, when I was heading back from the Historical Society, I saw Samantha leaving a meeting with suited executives at the only upscale restaurant in town. I discreetly snapped a photo of the group and later looked them up. They were representatives of Alpine Resorts, a company known for turning residential communities into upscale tourist destinations. My suspicions grew when I found a file on the county records office computer, a preliminary plan, never made public, for rezoning our entire community, turning residential areas into commercial ones. The document had been accessed multiple times from the HOA office's IP address. Everything started to make sense. The sports center was just the beginning. Samantha was planning a complete makeover of the neighborhood, and my property was in the way. With James's help, I learned that Mountain View Properties LLC had acquired a lot adjacent to mine, exactly where the sports center's main entrance would be. The value of that property would triple with the construction. Through Eleanor, I found out that an extraordinary HOA meeting would be held on Friday. I meticulously prepared my presentation, organizing documents, photos, maps, and evidence into a logical and impactful sequence. On the eve of the meeting, I got an anonymous call. "Give up now, Hayes. You have no idea how much money is involved." The community hall was packed when I arrived for the meeting. Samantha sat at the center of the board table, flanked by Patrick and the Reynolds. I noticed Sophia and Daniel sitting further back, with tense expressions. "Before we officially begin," Samantha announced, "I want to clarify that today's topic is merely the final approval of the sports center project, not property boundary issues." "With all due respect," I interrupted, "the two issues are inseparable, considering the center is planned for land that legally belongs to me." Patrick stood up. "The property issues have been handled administratively by the HOA. This isn't a court, Mr. Hayes." "I have every right to speak as any other association member," I insisted, "and what I have to say affects everyone in this room." Eleanor, seated in the front row, stood up, leaning on her cane. "As the longest-standing member of this community, I demand that Alexander be heard. It's our right to know everything before any vote." Other residents voiced their support, and Samantha had no choice but to relent. I connected my laptop to the projector and began my presentation. "What I'm going to show isn't just about my acre of land. It's about the future of our entire community. I displayed the original maps next to the fraudulent survey, highlighting the discrepancies. I presented the confirmation from the retired surveyor that he never did the new measurement. I showed photos of the historic artifacts and the preliminary certification from the Historical Society. But this is just the beginning, I continued. The much bigger question is, why is there so much interest in a specific piece of my land? I then projected the registration document for Mountain View Properties LLC, revealing the connection with Patrick, followed by photos from Samantha's meeting with Alpine Resorts executives. And finally, here is the plan that was never disclosed to you. The rezoning project appeared on the screen, showing the planned transformation of our residential neighborhood into a luxury commercial complex. A murmur ran through the room. This sports center isn't for us, the residents. It's the first phase of a much larger project that would completely transform our community, drastically raise our taxes, and eventually force many of us to sell and leave. Samantha stood up, furious. These are absurd defamatory accusations. I'm only working to improve our community. Then explain why the company you secretly control bought the property that would appreciate the most with the sports center, I shot back, displaying the purchase document with the name Mountain View LLC. The room exploded with talk and exclamations. Richard Reynolds abruptly stood up and left. Isabella followed him, shooting an angry look at Samantha. Daniel Stewart grabbed the microphone. As a board member, I demand that we immediately suspend any approval related to this project until all these accusations are fully investigated. Sophia Chen agreed. And I propose a full audit of all the HOA's decisions over the past 2 years. You can't do that, Samantha shouted. We have signed contracts, commitments. With whom? Asked one resident. With Alpine Resorts? And where does that appear in the HOA reports? Patrick tried to calm things down. Let's all remain calm. There must be explanations for all this. Like the explanation for your signature on that LLC constitution document that's buying up properties in our neighborhood? I asked, zooming in on the image on the screen. Several residents began demanding Samantha's immediate resignation. Others called for a formal investigation. The meeting that was supposed to be a formality to approve Samantha's project turned into her nightmare. When the chaos peaked, I raised my hand for silence. I'm not here just to expose a problem, but also to propose solutions. This community has been around for decades. We don't need outside investors telling us how to live. We can decide our own future. I propose the creation of a new oversight committee to ensure transparency in HOA decisions, clear rules about property boundaries, and a development plan that respected the neighborhood's residential character. The meeting ended with Samantha's temporary suspension from the presidency and the formation of an investigation committee. As people left, some thanked me gratefully while others looked shocked. Eleanor came over smiling. Your father would be proud. You didn't just defend your land, you defended the entire community. Patrick passed by and muttered, You have no idea what you've just done. There are powerful people involved. I looked him straight in the eye. Tell those powerful people we're ready for them. 3 days after that tumultuous meeting, I received a surprising message from Sophia Chen. Samantha had called an emergency meeting of the HOA Executive Board, excluding the members who had spoken out against her. They're going to try to override her suspension and approve the project anyway, Sophia explained over the phone. They're using an obscure clause in the bylaws that allows executive decisions in situations of emergency financial benefit for the community. The next morning, a delivery van pulled up in front of my house. The driver carried a subpoena. The HOA had filed a lawsuit claiming that I was hindering community progress with baseless allegations and was demanding $250,000 in compensation for damages to the association's reputation and loss of business opportunity. Eleanor put me in touch with her niece, a lawyer specializing in real estate law. This is a classic intimidation tactic, Julia explained after reviewing the documents. They're trying to scare you into accepting a quick settlement. Instead of backing down, I scheduled a formal property visit with representatives from the State Historical Preservation Commission. Laura brought along archaeologists who confirmed the significance of the artifacts found and documented the historic orchard planted by my grandfather, featuring rare apple varieties that were no longer commercially grown. While these experts examined my property, I got an unexpected call from Isabella Reynolds. We need to talk, Alexander. Not at my place and not at yours. Meet me at the downtown cafe in half an hour. Isabella sounded nervous when we met. Richard and I are separated, she revealed. I found out that he was involved in something much bigger than we imagined. She handed me a folder. Richard kept this from me for months. I found it while packing my things to leave. The folder contained detailed documents outlining a three-phase plan. First, building the sports center, then expanding to a full resort, and finally, gradually acquiring all the residential properties. There was also a contract between Alpine Resorts and Mountain View LLC, signed by Samantha and Patrick, guaranteeing substantial commissions on the acquired properties. Richard was just a pawn, Isabella explained. Samantha promised him a position as the new resort's manager. Our marriage was already in trouble, and he saw it as a chance to start over. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked. "Because they've crossed every line. Last night, Richard told me that Samantha suggested ways to persuade you more directly." Isabella hesitated. "I think they were considering measures that could put you in danger." I thanked Isabella and immediately shared the information with Sheriff Davis, who then increased patrols near my home. That very night, security cameras captured 2 men checking my property's boundaries. When confronted by the police, they claimed to be independent appraisers hired by the HOA, but they didn't have any proper documentation. Tensions in the community kept rising. Some neighbors, fearing a drop in their property values without the fancy sports center, started avoiding me. Others, particularly the longtime residents, openly expressed their support. Samantha scheduled another general HOA meeting for the following week. The official topic: final resolution of the property dispute and vote on the community sports center project. On the morning of the meeting, I parked at the entrance of the community hall and noticed unusual activity. Entire families were arriving, including people who rarely attended meetings. Eleanor explained that she had mobilized the network of longtime residents to ensure a massive turnout. Samantha seemed confident when she opened the session. Patrick was at her side with a stack of documents. Richard Reynolds didn't show up, but I noticed Isabella sitting quietly in the back of the hall. After careful legal consideration, Samantha began, "I have decided that the best way forward for our community is to definitively clear up this situation and move ahead with our modernization plans." Patrick distributed a new set of documents. After a thorough investigation, we discovered that the records presented by Mr. Hayes have serious inconsistencies. We have here an expert report indicating signs of tampering with the original documents. A chill ran down my spine. They were accusing me of faking historic records? Furthermore, Patrick continued, the analysis of the so-called historic artifacts suggests they're likely ordinary items with no significant archaeological value, recently placed to create a false narrative of historical importance. Murmurs spread through the hall. Their strategy was clear: discredit all of my evidence all at once. Therefore, Samantha concluded with a victorious smile, we ask that the Assembly immediately approve our original project and authorize appropriate legal measures against any malicious obstruction. It was my turn to speak. I stood up calmly and walked to the front of the hall. Before responding to these baseless accusations, I'd like to ask, is there anyone else who wants to speak up? Isabella Reynolds slowly stood up. I have something to say. Samantha frowned, clearly surprised. Ms. Reynolds, we appreciate your participation, but we're dealing with technical matters right now, and I have information directly relevant to these technical matters. Isabella interrupted, stepping up to the table with a folder in hand. Specifically about how these accusations were fabricated. The room fell into absolute silence. My husband Richard told me everything, Isabella continued. How Samantha planned every step from the start, how she falsified the survey, and how she's now trying to manufacture evidence against Alexander. Isabella opened the folder and projected emails and text messages exchanged between Richard, Samantha, and Patrick. This one from 3 days ago, Isabella highlighted a specific email, shows Samantha instructing Patrick to find an expert who can question the authenticity of Hayes's documents and prepare a report that casts doubt on the artifacts, no matter what the experts actually say. Patrick paled. Samantha tried to interrupt, but the assembly members demanded that Isabella continue. And here, Isabella showed another document, is the agreement between Alpine Resorts and Samantha, promising a 3% commission on all properties acquired for the full resort project, estimated at over $30 million. The hall erupted in outrage. Several owners stood up demanding answers. Samantha tried to regain control, banging a gavel repeatedly. This is defamation! These are fabricated documents, she shouted. We're here to vote on the sports center project, not to listen to baseless accusations from an emotionally unstable woman because of marital problems. Sophia Chen asked for the floor. As a board member, I call for the immediate suspension of this meeting and the formation of an ethics committee to investigate these serious allegations. Daniel Stewart supported her. and I propose that Samantha and Patrick be temporarily removed from any administrative role until this investigation is concluded. The vote was overwhelming, 43 in favor, 5 against. Samantha, clearly shaken, threw her papers on the table and left the room with Patrick in tow. 6 months passed since that decisive meeting. The transformation in our community was extraordinary. An independent investigation confirmed all the allegations against Samantha. She was permanently removed from the board, and Patrick faced disciplinary action from the Bar Association. Mountain View Properties LLC was dissolved, and the lot they had strategically acquired was turned into a small community park. In an ironic twist, the community approved the construction of a modest activity center, not on my property, but in a truly communal area near the neighborhood entrance. The project, led by Sophia Chen, included multi-purpose courts, a game room, and a space for a community garden coordinated enthusiastically by Eleanor. As for my property, the State Historical Preservation Commission granted official historic site status to the orchard and the archaeological area, ensuring their permanent protection. We organized educational visits for local schools, where children learn about the rare apple varieties and the history of the indigenous people who once lived in the region. A for sale sign appeared on Samantha's house 2 weeks after her removal from the board. I heard she moved to another state. Richard Reynolds also sold his share of the house to Isabella after the divorce and left town. Isabella stayed, surprisingly becoming an ally in rebuilding the community spirit. I was elected to head the newly created Property Rights Committee and the HOA's Architectural Review Committee. We established new guidelines that balanced responsible development with respect for property boundaries and local history. Rules about nighttime noise were also updated, much to everyone's relief. One autumn afternoon, as I was picking apples in my grandfather's century-old orchard, Eleanor appeared slowly walking with her cane, accompanied by several neighbors who had never visited my property before. "We're thinking of starting a small annual apple festival," she explained, "to celebrate our community's history and the victory over those who wanted to destroy it." Watching those people admire the trees my grandfather planted, I realized that my fight wasn't just about the land, but about the true meaning of community. The perfect trap against the HOA wasn't devised by me, but by Samantha's own greed. Land never really belongs to us, we're just its temporary stewards. My grandfather knew that when he planted trees whose fruit he might never see. My father honored that legacy. And now, looking at the neighbors gathered under the heavy apple trees, I realized I had achieved something far more valuable than an acre of land. I had restored the spirit of a true community. My grandfather's old box of documents now holds not only the original property maps, but also photos of the celebration we held when the orchard received its preservation status. Maybe someday, someone will open that box and discover the story of how a simple acre of land taught us the value of vigilance, perseverance, and community unity. And what about the Reynolds tennis court that encroached on my property? We converted part of it into a small community pavilion for picnics and celebrations. The rest was restored as a natural habitat for birds and bees that pollinate the historic orchard. The sign at the entrance simply reads, "Hayes Orchard, preserved in 2025 for future generations." And below, in smaller letters, "Some roots run deeper than the eyes can see."